While watching a horror movie, it should be pretty obvious who to root for. When a maniacal demon or masked lunatic is chasing someone, it's clear who's the victim and who's the bad guy. Sure, the hero may have some flaws, but it should be established early on that we're supposed to be on their side. The following figures may be labelled as champions, messiahs, or final girls, but there's no doubt they caused more trouble than the villains they went up against. I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 horror heroes worse than the villain. Number 10. Sean Deadstream. Shudder original Deadstream centers around Sean, a disgraced internet personality who decides to livestream himself inside a haunted house, hoping to win back sponsors and subscribers. After being attacked by a sinister spirit called Mildred, Sean realizes he's no longer fighting for his reputation, but for his soul. Sean may have screwed up in the past, but he's surprisingly likable, coming across as a bumbling fool rather than a heartless jackass. And when compared to Mildred, Sean comes across as a saint. However, Sean has done things that are borderline unforgivable. Near the climax, the airheaded streamer explains how his reputation was tarnished because he made a video of himself fighting a sick homeless man. Rather than making amends with the man he hospitalized and nearly beat to death, Sean was more concerned with being famous again. Mildred may be malevolent, but she was only unleashed upon the world because Sean summoned her in a feeble attempt to reclaim his popularity. As a result, everything that happens to Sean in the haunted house is his own fault, since he entered it of his own volition for selfish reasons. Number 9. Anna Jigsaw. The 8th entry in the Saw franchise follows widower Anna and 4 others who are forced to take part in one of Jigsaw's twisted games. Although the rest of the participants are unlikable, Anna immediately becomes across as smart and adaptable. She figures out how to escape from the first trap and helps the others to do the same. She cares for them when they're injured and tries to de-escalate every heated argument. In a nutshell, Anna seems like a textbook example of a final girl. Despite her innocent demeanor though, Anna is later exposed as the worst of the lot. When confronted with Jigsaw, the serial killer divulges to the remaining survivor, Ryan, that Anna murdered her own baby. Worse still, she pinned the crime on her husband, leading him to taking his own life. Nevertheless, Jigsaw gives Anna a chance to walk free, leaving a shotgun with one shell stating it contains the key to her freedom. Misconstruing Jigsaw's words, Anna shoots at Ryan, causing the gun to backfire and kill her. As Ryan looks inside the gun, he realizes the keys to their restraints were hidden inside, meaning the pair could have escaped if Anna wasn't so hasty. Anna was beyond redemption, and yet her abductor gave her a second chance. Instead, she tried to murder somebody to save her skin, which literally blew up in her face. Number 8. Eric, Evil Dead 2013. The Evil Dead franchise is filled with characters fighting the very evil that they themselves summoned. For example, Scott awakened the deities in the original film after playing a tape of an incantation, and Ash resurrected a legion of ghouls in Army of Darkness by performing the wrong spell. Of course, our heroes aren't fully to blame, since they couldn't have known what dark force they were releasing upon the world. That said, what was Eric's excuse in 2013's Evil Dead? When he found the Naturum Demonto, he immediately started reading it aloud, releasing the Deadites. Now, if the Naturum Demonto looked generically creepy, you could understand why Eric was curious to check it out. However, this wretched book was hidden and locked in chains, emphasizing how immeasurably dangerous it is. Even though the text is filled with warnings that read, "Leave this book alone," Eric performs the incantation anyway, leading to, well, exactly what you'd expect. He may have protected his friends and locked one of them in the basement when she got possessed, but this whole mess wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Eric. Number 7. Adelaide, Us. Jordan Peele's second feature begins with young Adelaide encountering her doppelganger, Red, after entering a funhouse. From there, the story then cuts to Adelaide decades later, still shaken by the experience. While on holiday with her husband and children, Adelaide senses something terrible is going to happen. Sure enough, the house is infiltrated that night by Red and a twisted version of Adelaide's family. Red explains to Adelaide how the doppelgangers were created by the US government to control the populace since they were tethered together. When the experiment failed, the tethered were abandoned underground. Although Red intends to replace her equivalent to exact her revenge, Adelaide kills Red, putting an end to the Tethered's scheme. But in the final moments, it's revealed that Red swapped places with Adelaide as children, meaning the protagonist was the clone all along. While underground, Red spent decades organizing an invasion, intending for the Tethered to replace their surface counterparts. In the closing shot, thousands of Tethereds are seen across the country, exposing the government's corrupt experiment to the world. The real Adelaide may be responsible for countless deaths, but it would have never happened, and the invasion wouldn't have come to fruition if her clone hadn't switched with her. Number 6. Tommy Jarvis, Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. The misleadingly titled Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, Jason Voorhees seemingly gets killed for good by Tommy Jarvis. However, that all changed in Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. Let's just ignore Part 5, where in the opening scene, it's clear Tommy is mentally unstable since he's convinced the hockey-masked psycho will rise from the grave. Unable to shake that feeling, Tommy drives to Crystal Lake and unearths Jason's body, preparing to cremate him. While the coffin is opened, Jason's husk is struck by lightning, bringing him back to life. Of course, Jason immediately starts lumbering around Crystal Lake, killing anyone he encounters. And although he's defeated, the machete-wielding Revenant would return again and again in various further sequels. Now, there are plenty of horror films where the protagonist unintentionally resurrects a great evil. In fact, the same thing happened in the follow-up, Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. That said, Tommy deserves special mention since he's directly responsible for transforming Jason into an inhumanly strong, unstoppable, unkillable force of evil. Up until this point, Jason's kill count in the franchise was about a dozen, but after Tommy accidentally juiced him to the max in Jason Lives, the Silent Slayer racked up a 200 plus kill count, and this only happened because Tommy was trying to kill someone who was already dead. Number 5. Miguel, Day of the Dead. In George A. Romero's zombie threequel, Day of the Dead, a batch of survivors are hiding from the undead in an underground military bunker commanded by Captain Rhodes. Rhodes is the ultimate a-hole since he contradicts, undermines, bullies, and flat-out murders anyone who challenges him, even when the others devise practical solutions to stay alive. He may be the big bad, but another survivor, Miguel, is arguably worse as he's directly responsible for exasperating or creating almost every single problem in the movie. Despite Miguel's gross incompetence, scientist Sarah, with whom he shares a relationship, repeatedly tries to soothe him, but is only met with hostility. Miguel doesn't pay attention while he's supposed to be rounding up zombies, leading to 2 soldiers dying. When he later gets bitten on the arm, Sarah amputates it before the virus infects him, preventing Miguel from becoming a zombie. Instead of being grateful, though, Miguel berates the woman who saved his life. Still, nevertheless, Sarah tries helping her idiotic friend with medicine. Sadly, Miguel is unable to carry on, though he eventually decides to take his own life. Rather than blowing his brains out, Miguel opens the perimeter fence, allowing hundreds of zombies to storm in. Just to be a king-sized jerk, he activates the elevator, allowing the flesh eaters to access the area where the survivors are residing. So when you look at Miguel's behavior as a whole, Captain Rhodes doesn't seem all that bad. Number 4. AJ, Barbarian. In Zach Cregger's horror thriller Barbarian, actor AJ is fired from his TV series after a co-star brings some extremely serious accusations against it. With no money coming in, AJ is pressurized to sell his assets, including the home he rents out through Airbnb. While inspecting the house, AJ discovers an elaborate tunnel system where he finds the previous tenant, Tess, being cared for, against her will, by an inbred savage called the Mother. Even though AJ seems like a scumbag, there's a sliver of decency inside him. For example, when he discovers another man in the tunnels, he tries to rescue him before discovering he's the one who created the Mother. And when Tess is injured, AJ drags her to safety and back to the surface. Though AJ looks like he's being set up for a redemption arc, that goes out the window when he hurls Tess off a water tower, hoping the Mother will leap off to rescue her. What makes AJ's actions more deplorable is the fact Tess bent over backward to save him, returning to the Airbnb herself when the authorities refused to help. The Mother may look like a monster, but she's not evil since she acts out of instinct rather than malice. Yes, she's a killer, but that's only to protect Tess, who she perceives as her child. AJ, on the other hand, is a predator who will sacrifice anyone in a heartbeat to save himself. Number 3. Ball and Real, His House. Movie heroes sometimes have to make questionable and immoral decisions to stay alive. If we were in their shoes, we may do the exact same thing. With that said, the leads in His House went way too far. After South Sudanese couple Ball and Real escape their war-torn home, they find refuge in England. Despite dealing with poverty and racism, the pair try their best to make a life for themselves. But when Ball and Real discover a dark spirit called an Apeth has taken residence in their house, their lives quickly unravel. Considering how much the pair have endured, it's heartbreaking to watch them being terrorized like this. However, during a flashback, it's revealed Ball and Real attempted to flee their homeland on a bus that only let on parents and children. The couple had no kids, so they kidnapped a young girl and passed her off as their daughter to escape. While the 3 of them made their way through the English Channel, the girl fell overboard and drowned. As terrifying as the Apeth is, it's only haunting Ball and Real because of their actions. Even though they did what they had to for their own survival, it's hard to sympathize with them after learning they tore a child away from its mother. Number 2. Louis Creed, Pet Sematary. For a protagonist to be relatable, it's best to keep their stupid behavior to a minimum. But if the main character isn't in their right mind, they deserve some leniency when they do something profoundly dumb. With that said, Lewis Creed from Pet Sematary takes all of the biscuits. In this Stephen King adaptation, Lewis moves his family to a remote house that's located near a mystical graveyard that revives the recently buried. When his cat dies, Lewis sees how upset his children are, incentivizing him to bury the kitty in the cemetery. Though the family's pet returns to life, he becomes a violent zombie. Sadly, the cat becomes the least of Lewis's problems after his toddler Gage is fatally struck by a truck. Consumed by grief, Lewis places his boy in the cursed burial ground, causing him to be reborn as a murderous ghoul who slaughters Lewis's wife, compelling him to put Gage down for good. Lewis's behavior may be foolish, but it's also to a certain extent understandable. After all, he was just trying to reunite with his son, but after what he's been through, he'd have to be a complete idiot to make that mistake again. Of course, the final scene sees Lewis bury his dead wife in the cemetery, hoping things will turn out better this time. To the surprise of nobody, Lewis is killed by his undead wife immediately after. As tragic as this climax is, it's totally Lewis's fault. It may be hard to accept, but he and his wife would still be alive if he simply accepted his son's death. Number 1. Mimi, Psycho Goreman. In zany splatter horror Psycho Goreman, young Mimi awakens an alien after unearthing an ancient amulet. Despite his godlike power, the cosmic demon must obey the amulet's wielder. For this reason, the creature, who Mimi dubs Psycho Goreman, is forced to obey her unconditionally. Although Goreman appears to be evil incarnate, nothing can compete against Mimi's mean streak. Even though Mimi could turn PG into a force of good, she makes him unleash his power upon anyone who mildly inconveniences her. When a cop erroneously believes Goreman is harassing Mimi, she could have asked him to get lost. Instead, she has Goreman melt the lawman's skin to the point where he begs for death, all because he was trying to protect her. After a boy called Alistair refuses to play with Mimi, she has her unwilling slave transform him into a brain monster. For the record, this kid didn't bully Mimi or anything. He just wanted to play with her brother instead, and for that he's forced to live the rest of his life as a weird blob, being still stuck in this form by the time the credits roll. In Psycho Goreman's climax, Mimi seemingly learns the error of her ways, acknowledging she needs to find a less destructive way to deal with her insecurities. So when Goreman is freed from the amulet's control, Mimi could have persuaded the tyrannical despot to abandon his megalomaniacal crusade. Instead, the bratty kid tells the galactic overlord he can kill anyone but her family. After that, Mimi returns to her family, surprisingly okay with Goreman laying waste to the world.